I sat in the United States bankruptcy court for the District of Massachusetts, not because I was broke, but because my parents wanted the entire city of Boston to watch me bleed. The courtroom was packed. Every seat in the gallery was filled with reporters my father had tipped off and family friends my mother had invited. They weren't here for a legal proceeding. They were here for a public execution. My execution. Across the aisle, my brother Trevor smirked at me, already tasting his victory. My mother wept into a silk handkerchief, performing the role of the heartbroken matriarch to perfection. They had filed a petition to declare me mentally incompetent and financially destitute, a legal maneuver designed to strip me of everything I owned. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just waited. Then Judge Harrison looked up from the case file. He adjusted his glasses, frowned at a single page and asked the one question that sucked the air out of the room. "Ms. Ross," he said, his voice cutting through the silence, "is your so-called hobby company currently under a classified contract with the Department of Defense?" My father froze. My brother's smirk died. And for the first time in 8 years I smiled. "Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." The air conditioning in the federal courthouse had surrendered hours ago, leaving the room heavy with the scent of stale floor wax and the cloying, expensive perfume my mother had worn since I was a child. It was a suffocating mix, one that triggered a muscle memory of panic I had spent a decade trying to unlearn. But today I didn't panic. I just watched. To my left sat Marcus, my attorney. He wasn't one of the polished country club lawyers my father usually hired. Marcus looked like he had been carved out of granite and left in a boxing ring a little too long. He didn't stack papers or check his watch. He sat perfectly still, a predator waiting for movement in the tall grass. Across the aisle, the plaintiff's table was a study in theatrical grief. My father, Richard, sat with his spine rigid, staring at the seal of the United States as if he were waiting for it to apologize to him. Beside him was my mother, Cynthia. She was dressed in severe black, a mourning outfit for a daughter who was still sitting right there. She dabbed at dry eyes with a rhythmic precision that was almost hypnotic. And then there was Trevor, my brother, the golden boy. He sat forward, elbows on the table, exuding the easy, unearned confidence of a man who had never been told no without a checkbook appearing to soften the blow. He caught my eye and offered a small, sad smile. It was a masterpiece of gaslighting. To the gallery behind him, the reporters and socialites they had invited, that smile said, "I tried to save her." To me it said, "I am going to crush you into dust." My name is Hannah. I am 32 years old. For most of my life, I existed as a footnote in the grand biography of my family. I was the difficult one. The quiet one. The one who didn't fit the mold. And looking at them now, seeing the genuine righteousness on their faces, I finally understood the mechanism of their cruelty. See, to the outside world what they were doing looked insane. Who drags their daughter to federal court to declare her incompetent just to seize her assets? But I realized in that moment that they didn't see themselves as villains. They were caught in the trap of normalized cruelty. Over 30 years, they had built a family culture where my pain was the fuel for their comfort. To them, stripping me of my autonomy wasn't abuse. It was a correction. It was a necessary administrative task to restore the natural order where they were the kings and I was the subject. My mother wasn't crying because she was sad I was losing my company. She was crying because my resistance was inconvenient. They had normalized the idea that I existed solely to be consumed. "You okay?" Marcus whispered without turning his head. "I'm fine," I whispered back. "Good," he said. "As they're putting on quite a show. Your father must have called in every favor he's owed since the 90s to fill this room." "They want a spectacle," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "They don't just want my money, Marcus. They want to make sure I can never show my face in this city again. They want to paint me as the unstable, delusional daughter who played business and lost the family legacy." Marcus finally looked at me. His dark eyes were hard and intelligent. "Let them paint," he said softly. "We brought the turpentine." I looked back at Trevor. He was whispering something to their lawyer, pointing at a stack of forged documents with a sense of absolute entitlement. He thought this was an intervention. He thought he was disciplining a child. He had no idea that he hadn't walked into a courtroom. He had walked into a slaughterhouse and he was the cattle. They brought a knife to a drone strike. "Your Honor," I said, standing up. My legs felt solid, rooted to the floor like the steel beams of the secure facility I built. "I am confirming that my company, which the plaintiff refers to as a hobby, is currently the primary contractor for the Citadel Shield program." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The reporters were typing furiously now. The narrative of the helpless, mentally unstable daughter had just driven headfirst into a concrete wall labeled National Security. To understand why my father looked like he had just swallowed glass, you have to understand the lie he has told himself for 8 years. In the Hawthorne family mythology, I was the broken toy. I was the one who needed fixing. But the truth was, I wasn't broken. I was just hiding. I remember the exact moment I decided to vanish. It was a Sunday in November 8 years ago. We were in my father's study, a room that smelled of old leather and unearned superiority. I had prepared a pitch deck. I wasn't asking for millions. I was asking for $5,000 to buy server space for a prototype I had coded. I laid it all out: the market gap in operational technology security, the threat of cyber warfare on power grids. I was passionate. I was precise. My father didn't even look at the charts. He took a sip of his scotch and sighed, the weary sigh of a man burdened by a disappointing child. "Hannah," he said, his voice smooth and dismissive. "This is a hobby. It's toys for boys in basements. You don't have the temperament for business. You're too emotional. If I give you this money, you'll burn through it in 6 months and come crying back for rent." He stood up and walked to the window, turning his back on me. "I won't fund your failure. When you're ready to be serious, come talk to me. I'm sure Trevor can find a spot for you answering phones." That was the moment the daughter died and the CEO was born. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I packed up my papers and walked out. They thought I was retreating to lick my wounds. They didn't know I was retreating to build an arsenal. For the next 8 years, I lived a double life. To my family, I was Hannah, the struggling freelancer living in a studio apartment they wouldn't be caught dead visiting. I drove a 10-year-old car. I wore thrift store clothes. I let them believe I was barely scraping by. But in the dark, I was building an empire. I rented a freezing warehouse in the industrial district. I hired a team of misfits, hackers, engineers, architects, who didn't care about my last name, only my code. We built systems to protect hospitals from ransomware and power plants from state-sponsored attacks. To the world, I wasn't Hannah Hawthorne. I was H.R. Sterling, a ghost entity on paper. I erased my footprint so completely that my own father didn't know the woman sitting across from him at Thanksgiving controlled the digital security of 3 states. I thought I could keep the world separate forever. I thought if I stayed small in their eyes, they would leave me alone. I was wrong. You can leave a family like mine, but they never really let you go. Not when they smell money. They found out because I got sloppy. A compliance consultant I hired mentioned my name at a country club mixer. She dropped a hint about a massive government contract. My father didn't hear hard work. He didn't hear patriotism. He heard $250 million. He looked at that number and felt entitled to it. In his mind, my success was a theft of his potential. He convinced himself that I was incompetent, that I must have stumbled into this fortune by accident, and that it was his moral duty to step in and take control before I ruined it. That's why we were here. This wasn't an intervention. It was a hostile takeover disguised as parental concern. I looked at Trevor. He was staring at the table, his jaw clenched. He knew. He knew about the contract because he was the one who had been feeding the lawyers the information to build this case. He wasn't trying to save his sister. He was trying to hijack a clearance. They thought they were dealing with the girl who begged for $5,000. They didn't realize they were picking a fight with the military-industrial complex. Their lawyer stood up. His name was Sterling, and he had the kind of polished, predatory grace that comes from billing $600 an hour to destroy families. He didn't look at me. He looked at the gallery, at the reporters, at the judge. He buttoned his jacket with a flourish, signaling that the performance was about to begin. "Your Honor," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a somber baritone. "We are here with heavy hearts. This isn't just a case of financial mismanagement. This is a tragedy of mental decline." I felt Marcus tense beside me, but he didn't move. "Wait," he whispered. "The defendant," Sterling continued, gesturing vaguely in my direction as if I were a stain on the carpet, "has been soliciting massive personal loans from her family to fund a delusion. She claims to be running a defense firm. She claims to have government contracts. But the reality, sadly, is much darker. We have bank statements showing she burned through $4.5 million of her brother's money in 6 months on frivolous expenses, manic episodes, and what we can only describe as a complete break from reality." He walked to the plaintiff's table and picked up a thick binder. "We are asking the court to grant immediate conservatorship to her father, Richard Hawthorne, to stop the bleeding before she hurts herself or others." The gallery murmured. I could feel the eyes of the reporters burning into the back of my neck. They weren't writing about a savvy CEO anymore. They were writing about the crazy heiress who lost her mind. It was a perfect story. It was the story my family had been telling about me since I was 12 years old. Hannah is too emotional. Hannah is difficult. Hannah imagines things. Then Trevor took the stand. He didn't look like the man who had screamed at me in the parking lot 3 days ago. He looked like a saint. He sat forward, his hands clasped, his expression a masterpiece of sorrow. "I tried to help her," Trevor told the court, his voice cracking just enough to sound authentic. "She called me in the middle of the night, screaming about spies and codes. I wired her the money because I thought if I just supported her company, she would calm down. I didn't know she was just throwing it away." He looked at me then. A single, sad tear slid down his cheek. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. "I love my sister," he said. "I just want her to get the help she needs." I looked at my mother in the front row. She was nodding, wiping her eyes, validating every lie he spun. In that moment I realized the depth of their betrayal. They weren't just trying to steal my money. They were trying to erase me. They were willing to put on public record that I was insane just to get their hands on my clearance. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout that I built a fortress while they were playing golf. But Marcus's hand clamped onto my wrist under the table. His grip was iron. He didn't look at me. He was staring at Trevor with the cold, dead eyes of a shark smelling blood in the water. "Let him talk," Marcus whispered, barely moving his lips. "Let him put it on the record. Every word he says right now isn't testimony, Hannah. It's perjury. He's digging his own grave with his mouth. Let him keep digging until he hits the bottom." So I sat there. I let them paint me as the villain. I let them layer lie upon lie, building a tower of falsehoods so high it scraped the ceiling. They thought they were burying me. They didn't realize they were standing on a trapdoor and I was holding the lever. Sterling sat down, looking pleased with himself. He checked his watch, probably calculating his billable hours. The room was heavy with the weight of my supposed insanity. My mother was sobbing into her handkerchief again, a performance so committed I almost applauded. Then Marcus stood up. He didn't walk to the podium. He didn't button his jacket. He simply picked up a single sheet of paper from our table and held it up to the light like he was inspecting a counterfeit bill. "Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the humid air like a scalpel. "The plaintiff claims this loan document was signed and notarized 6 months ago. They claim it is the bedrock of their petition." Marcus approached the bench with surgical calm. "There's a flaw in the foundation. It's sand." He placed the document before the judge. "The notary seal belongs to Cynthia Hawthorne, the defendant's mother. Unfortunately, her notary commission expired 10 years ago. Using an expired seal to validate a forged federal bankruptcy filing isn't a mistake. It's felony fraud and conspiracy." The courtroom went silent. My mother froze mid-sob. My father stiffened. What they thought was a family intervention had just become a federal trap. Judge Harrison's expression hardened. "Ms. Ross, answer carefully. Is Northbridge a prime contractor for the Department of Defense?" "Yes, Your Honor. We manage encryption keys for the Citadel Shield program. We are an active national security asset." The judge turned to opposing counsel. "So you filed a petition to seize a defense contractor using a fraudulent document notarized by an expired seal belonging to the plaintiff's mother?" Sterling couldn't speak. I stepped forward. "They aren't just trying to take my company. They're interfering with the deployment. 48 hours ago I suspected a leak, so I initiated a shadow protocol. I explained that I had planted a single false memo claiming I was liquidating assets and fleeing to the Cayman Islands, fed to exactly one person. If my brother knew, he wasn't a creditor. He was spying." Trevor panicked. He lunged forward, waving a flight manifest. "She already booked the jet. She's a flight risk." I calmly corrected him. "That flight doesn't exist. I created that PDF on an air-gapped server in my locked office. The only way he has it is through illegal spyware." The realization hit the room like a shockwave. Judge Harrison slammed the gavel. "Petition dismissed with prejudice. Marshals, take the plaintiff into custody. This is now a federal criminal matter." Trevor snapped. In desperation, he hit what he believed was a kill switch on his phone. Every screen in the courtroom turned red. The Department of Defense seal appeared. "Unauthorized access detected. Counterespionage protocol active." "That wasn't a delete button," I said coldly. "It was an upload." His phone was cloning everything. Messages, accounts, evidence directly to the FBI. As agents moved in, I understood the truth. They believed power was inherited, that rules bent for them. They were wrong. I walked out into the cold Boston air, free at last. I hadn't lost a family table. I had built my own. And it was unbreakable.